For those of you who don't know me, I'm Councillor Kelsey Lerney, Winchester City Council Cabinet Member for Housing and Asset Management. The purpose of this evening is to publicly report back on the consultation the City Council have held on our central Winchester development proposals, what we did, what the response was, what was said, and what happens next. The meeting is scheduled to last for an hour and a half, and over an hour will be available to deal with questions from the public. I'm delighted to say that we have over 150 people registered to attend this virtual meeting of the Open Forum, far more than we'd normally expect for a physical meeting. Because of those numbers, we are moderating the question and answer panel to ensure it doesn't become a series of confusing side conversations. Although we're moderating, all questions will be shown for all attendees to see, but there may be a bit of a lag before they appear. This meeting is being recorded and will be published by the City Council. Our Open Forum panel members are here. They do represent themselves or their organisations, and while if relevant I may call on them to respond to questions from the public, it will be to give their and not a council view. Our panellists are in no particular order. Paul Spencer from the Winchester Bid, Paul Sackwell from the Hampshire Cultural Trust, Andy Key from Cycle Winchester, Phil Gagg from Winchester Action on Climate Change, and City Councillors Caroline Horrell, Russell Gordon-Smith, Fiona Mather and Liz Hutchinson. In addition to the panel, we have Councillor Todd, Cabinet Member for Service Quality and Transformation, who is responsible for parking and transport, Katie Kopek and Jennifer Newsham from JLL, our Strategic Advisors, Sophie Camburn from Arup, Verian Lyons, our Central Winchester Programme Director, and Chaz Bradfield, our Strategic Director of Place. We are going to go into a presentation. It will be relatively short, so we're not going to be suffering from death by PowerPoint this evening. It would be helpful if, as we go through the presentation, you do start asking questions, which will allow us to start grouping and deal with them relatively quickly as we go into our Q&A session. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Verian Lyons to tell us about the consultation and what we did.
Consultation steps that we took. We are also going to be sharing with you the reach and how many people engaged with us throughout that process, and we're going to be feeding back this evening the key comments and the key themes that are beginning to come back from that consultation. You'll see as we go through the presentation that we've had a lot of response, a lot of respondents and an awful lot of comments come back, which we're hugely excited about because obviously people have really engaged with us on it. So we'll be feeding back what you're starting to say a little bit later on in the presentation. So I think what we'd like to do to start with is just remind you where we've been and how we've got to this point. So if we could move on to the next slide, please, Nick. This is quite a hectic looking slide, but we'll dwell on it for a little while because we've heard throughout the consultation comments that actually people don't understand what we've been doing since adoption of the SPD. So I'm just going to take you back to that moment in time, back in June 2018, when after 18 months of engagement with the local community district-wide, we had a dedicated consultation session prior to the adoption of the SPD, and we then adopted that, as I say, in June 2018. You will all know and all be familiar with the vision, a vibrant scheme, mix of uses, a heritage and cultural offer, exceptional public realms throughout the scheme, and imaginative reuse of existing buildings. And there were 9 objectives in the SPD, and what we needed to do from that point because the SPD is planning guidance. It's not a development, it's not a master plan, it's a document and a policy around the guidance that the planning regime will look to interpret as planning applications start to come forward for development. So we took the framework of the SPD. You'll all know that there's a wealth of information in there and guidance, a range of different uses that we could use, and also a wealth of guidance on heights and massing and layout of the site. But as I say, it's planning guidance, and what we had to do is understand how we could move that along and deliver a scheme that could actually be delivered and developed on the site. We developed a roadmap for delivery, which we shared at Cabinet in the December, and you can see that at the bottom of your slide. So December 18, we spent a bit of time understanding what the implications were of delivering a development scheme in line with the guidance of the SPD. And we also, some of the key things that came out from the SPD was understanding the key areas of interest that people are really keen for us to explore. And one of those was archaeology. And we had a big event also in the December around how we conduct the archaeological elements of the development across the scheme. So we had a really successful day of archaeology events in December 18, culminating in an evening session where we had an archaeology panel come in and talk through the approach that we would be taking to archaeology. So we did that, we shared the roadmap and looked at all the different elements that Central Winchester needed to bring together, and we soon and quickly realised that learning from the previous experience we've had and the fact that Central Winchester is a really challenging scheme and a really challenging site to bring forward, we needed some expert help. And we went off, and throughout sort of the spring of the following year, we procured and then appointed JLL, working with Arup, as our strategic advisors. They then came on board, and you can see on the slide on the screen, if you've got really good eyesight, that we then spent some time working with JLL to understand what Central Winchester is, and all the different elements as per the roadmap that we developed, and understanding all the different bits that needed to come together, and they reviewed that with us. And at the same time, they also did some competitive positioning work, which was really getting to understand Winchester and the district and the competition and where the opportunities are within Winchester. We know its strengths are the heritage and the culture. We know that there are some really key things that bring people to Winchester, but where is it that we could fill some gaps to make it a more diverse offer? So those two pieces of work came to an end and came to be completed towards the end of 2019. And coupled with the guidance of the SPD, like I say, it's planning guidance. We looked at the different options that we had within the ranges. We built on the work that JTP did, understanding where they thought the scheme could go. And we coupled that with work that JLL did with us to understand the gaps of Winchester. So the scenarios and the concepts that we thought about within the ranges and the parameters of the SPD, we then shared an open forum in public in February of 2020. And you'll remember that we had three scenarios at that point. We had business not as usual, which was a commercially led scheme. We had Homes for All, which is a residentially led scheme, and building, particularly that one, building on the work that JTP had done. And we also did a scheme which was heavily led by the cultural elements, and we called that Destination Max. So again, to remind you, there's a lot of work gone up to those points, and bringing everyone with us, taking us on that journey. We didn't want to go from planning guidance through to a master plan scheme without understanding that we were in the right direction and that people were with us. And we wanted to hear what people thought about if we flexed up and down with the different parameters and the different ranges of uses within the SPD, what the scheme could look like. And it could look very different. You know, it could be a residential or a commercial or a culturally led scheme. So we shared that. We took the feedback from that, what the public liked, what you didn't like, what you wanted to see more of. And again, working with JLL and Arup, we started then to bring those elements together, with the guidance of the SPD around heights and massing and site layout, concentrating on the vibrant mix of uses that people wanted to see. And we then developed the draft scenarios, which we then had to go away and work on the viability and how it could be delivered. We want to work within the confines and the guidance of the SPD around different looks and feels, incremental delivery, so that we really captured the essence of what the SPD suggests that we do with the site. So we did all that, and as you know, we had the consultation back towards the end of last year, sharing the work that we'd done with you from the planning guidance right the way through to actually sharing some proposals with you that can actually be physically delivered on site. Alongside that, there were some elements that we could do in the background and running in tandem with that. As I mentioned, we had an archaeology event, and from the back of that, the approach with Central Winchester Archaeology is that we will follow the National Planning Policy Guidance, which is primarily to preserve in situ and to do minimal intrusion to any archaeological deposits that are beneath the ground. But in order for us to do that and understand what condition the ground is, and therefore what condition the deposits might be, we needed to do some sampling and some testing. So following that cabinet session and the archaeology day back in 2018, we then went on to understand what that would involve, commission some archaeologists to get on site so that we could start that sampling, we could get a baseline of data and build on that as we start to develop the site. So that's actually happening. You might have been around the site and seen various little sort of caps in the ground. There's been a little bit of on our website around what we've been doing. We've been working with the archaeologists. They went in, they did the boreholes. I think we've got 14 across the site, and they are now testing weekly the soil and the water levels within those boreholes. We're expecting a report fairly soon now, which is their first interim report on what the soil conditions and the ground conditions are like beneath the site. Particularly of interest is the bus station. We don't have much information on the bus station at the moment and the ground beneath that. So there's a lot of information to collect on there. But that's ongoing, and that will then be added into any sort of development plans which will help inform developers on the way that the construction methods that we will expect to see. If there are any key finds or any real areas of interest that appear throughout any of the development work, they will be dealt with in line with the planning policy, and that will be dealt with as part of the planning process. So we're well underway with that, and that will then help to inform and help developers sort of de-risk the site really, so that it takes away some of the unknown. We also understand that people really want to see the Broadway come to life and be a much better gateway to the city, and we therefore commissioned some work to do some designs around the concepts for what that could become on the Broadway and the lower section of the High Street, and those concept designs have been shared in public at one of our open forums, so you'll be familiar with those. And what we are doing at the moment is taking those designs, looking with a group of sort of stakeholders that we've been working with to understand then how they can be incorporated into a public realm principles document across the site. So that work is ongoing. We are also, work that we've also done is, and it's no easy issue, is understanding how we can relocate the bus station. We're all aware of, obviously, that the bus station sits in the centre of the site, so we've had to think really carefully about how we free up the site for development whilst keeping the public coming into the centre and making the town remain vibrant. So that's taken some doing, and we'll come on to that in a minute. And as you all know, imaginative reuse of existing buildings has been something that we have been talking about. So you can see that throughout, you know, from 2018 through until the consultation, we have been working on the overarching development proposals, but we've also been doing some of the work that sits beneath that, and that will then start to inform the wider plans as they come forward. So what I'll do now is hand over to my colleague Louise. She will take you through the things that we have done in this consultation period that closed back in, I think it was the 12th of January. And then what we'll do is we will start to feed back to you some of those comments and some of the key themes that have started to come through. We're not responding to those at the moment, and you'll see our thoughts on that afterwards. We've had such a large response, and so many people have taken the time to let us have their thoughts. We needed to make sure that we gave those due consideration. So what we've decided to do is to let you know what we did and tell you the numbers of the people that we reached and tell you what those comments are here this evening, give you the chance to ask any questions. And what we will then do is, when we've had the chance to analyse and really think about all those comments that we've had in, we will have another open forum to feed those back to you. But we'll come on to that a little bit later on in the presentation. So Louise, would you like to just talk us through what we've done so far to date on the consultation? Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Could I have the next slide, please? So firstly, let's take a look at the ways in which we encouraged people to take part in the consultation. We used a number of methods of engagement to do this, including council platforms and newsletters, Your Council News and City Voice. We undertook targeted advertising on Facebook and also some polling on Twitter. We put some posters up in the Broadway and across the parishes, and we placed an advertisement in the Mid-Hants Observer. We sent out e-newsletters to our database, and we also had dedicated pages on our website and highlighted on our homepage to increase drive-through to people looking at those. We issued a number of media releases, and we also sent flyers including all of the information about how to get involved to businesses, to local schools, universities, to Hampshire, and also to the hospital staff. Next slide, please. And now let's look at how many people got involved and how they took part. So this is a sort of snapshot of the figures that we have, we've now been able to add up. And in terms of those who visited our virtual exhibition, which was hosted online, over 2,700 people visited that exhibition. We reached over 480,000 people via social media, which resulted in over 3,000 engagements, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on those in a moment. We had 44 stakeholders attend an online session, a consultation session dedicated to stakeholder groups, and 85 members of the public also attended an online consultation session. And that led to 336 completed questionnaires via our Citizen Space platform, which we encourage people to look at and to complete a questionnaire. So next slide, please, gives us a little bit more detail into the visits to our virtual exhibition, which is, as you will see, 2,759 unique visits. And the pie chart there just gives us a little bit more information in terms of the ages of those who attended that exhibition. And we were pleased to see the number of people who visited the sites under the age of 34, which was really encouraging for that. Next slide, please. And also social media and the total numbers there of reach. And I mentioned previously the number of engagements on those posts, and that reached 3,371 engagements. So that includes a like or a share, a comment, or a link click through to the exhibition. And again, we just looked there in terms of the age groups and interested in the number of sort of the younger groups that did engage on those platforms. And we also did some polling on Twitter and asked some questions with relation to the consultation. And there's an example of one of those there. and 166 people engaged via that platform. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we also hosted some dedicated online consultation sessions for stakeholders, and there includes some of those organisations who took part in those, the media, businesses, landowners. We met with the Hampshire Cultural Trust, the Cities of Winchester Trust, with the BID, with the City Centre Partnership, the Town Forum, and we also had a meeting with the LEP. And as you may have taken part yourselves, we held a number of public sessions which were over different times of the day and different days of the week to encourage as much participation as possible. And there, over those different dates, a number of participants, and we also held a session dedicated for local residents neighbouring the site as well, and that was 85 members of the public in total. And then, as I highlighted earlier, the response via Citizen Space to actually filling in our questionnaire was 336 completed questionnaires, and the initial numbers there were 198 in support, 94 not support, and 44 that did not answer the question. And we'll be looking into these numbers a lot more as part of our feedback analysis. So I'm going to hand back now to Verian to talk through some of the themes we've identified from the feedback so far.
Thank you, Louise. So some really interesting things have started to come out from the process. And just to let you know what the process is, every single comment that was entered via the Citizen Space link, we are logging and collating so that we have the groups and the themes that people are raising. Although we had 336 individual respondents, as you know, if you responded to the questionnaire, there were 10 to 12 questions, and you could write whatever you wanted to write on that questionnaire. So we've had a lot of information there, which has been really useful for us to gauge your responses to some of the things that we've obviously been sharing with you. The other interesting thing, which we haven't gone through yet, but we do fully intend to go through, is just looking at the different age ranges, because for those of you that are following the progress of the project, you'll know that one of the gaps that we're looking to fill with Central Winchester is to try and retain and attract the younger generation to stay here in the city. We all know we've got a lot of young people here through the universities and those that live here, but you'll have heard us say before, a lot of those, when they finish their studies, they move away and they take all that enthusiasm and that talent with them. So as part of the competitive positioning work that JLL did with us when they first arrived, we identified actually that in order to maintain and keep a strong and resilient economy, we need to attract more of those youngsters to stay in the city. And a way of doing that is obviously to provide somewhere for them to live, work and play right in the heart of the centre. We've got 2 universities on our doorstep, and it's building those links and trying to engage with those youngsters. And it probably won't surprise you to hear that we've had quite a bit of difficulty, and it's created challenges in the past. How do we communicate with those youngsters? How do we communicate with that target age group? And I think although lockdown, I'm sure, is beginning to wear pretty thin with most of us, we have had to think really differently about our engagement and our consultation, because we can't do things in the traditional way. We would normally have a physical meeting and physical exhibitions, and we've just not been able to do that. So we've done our utmost to make it as accessible as we possibly can to our interested people. We've contacted all those that have been following us and been interested in the past. We've done posters, as Louise said, we've got hard copies. So we've really tried to get to the people that are really interested. but we've also tried new things, and I think the virtual exhibition and the social media side of it is something that we haven't necessarily tried in any great depth before, but we had to think differently this time. And I think you could see from some of those statistics that we are starting to get through to some of that target age group. So about 30% of the respondents that we've had, particularly on the social media, has been in our target age group, and that's a group that we wouldn't have necessarily met had we just gone through the traditional fill in the citizen space form. So it's been quite interesting to understand the demographics and the age ranges and which methods and which models that they've engaged with us. And we're starting now, once we've logged all of the comments, we will then start to do some analysis on that, so that again we can feed all that back to you at a later date when we share the outcomes of the consultation with you. But it's been a real experience and really exciting for us to see how these different forms of engagement and consultation have started to take effect. So what I'll do at the moment now is we are looking at, purely at this stage, we're looking at the citizen space feedback forms, because that's where we were asking everyone to formally comment. So anybody that has formally submitted a comment via citizen space, we will be logging that if we haven't already, grouping it and considering a response to that. So rest assured, if you've taken the time to fill in a questionnaire, we will be looking at those and considering all the comments that we've had. We've had a lot, as I said before, but what we do want to do tonight is to share with you some of the key things that are coming back from those different groups of themes that we shared with you. So if we look at the first slide, which is around housing. So you'll remember from the exhibition and the feedback form that it's split into themes: housing, which is live, work, play, and then we went on to movement, public spaces and sustainability, and delivery approach. So we're grouping all of the correspondence and all of the comments into those groups, and we'll then feed back on those. But some of the key headlines, sort of hot off the press as they're coming in, to share with you tonight, which has been really useful for us. With regards to the residential elements of it, huge support for the approach of affordable housing. People are really pleased to see that we are looking to provide affordable housing in the heart of the centre. And what they're saying is, what a lot of the comments coming back are, please make it truly affordable housing, and also give some thought to, is there a way to keep it affordable? So not just have it as affordable for the first people that engage with you on it, but how is there a way to keep that affordable going forward? And another key thing that's coming out along those lines is that it's really key that local people get the chance to take advantage of this. So really pleased around the affordable housing, but commenting that they would really like locals to be able to be involved and have the chance to take advantage of that. One of the other key comments that's coming in, and I think this won't surprise any of you, that design has been quite a large topic of conversation, not just on residential but across the piece, that people really want the designs and the architecture to be sympathetic to Winchester as things start to come forward, and also of a high standard that reflects the historic nature of the city. So there's a lot of comment around that coming in. And there's also a lot of comments coming in around the sorts of residential offer and the type of offer that we're looking to provide. Again, a lot of support for gearing up for the younger people, and quite a lot of questions around, what does co-living mean? Does that work with co-working, and what is build to rent? So we're starting now to engage with people about the types of residential that we would like to try and see on the site. But there is also a little bit of chatter around, is it really suitable for young families, and also why are you not considering accommodation for the older generation? You're concentrating heavily on the youngsters, but what about the older generation? So those are the key themes that are coming back from the housing comments. And like I say, we haven't had the chance to give them all due consideration yet. So bear with us. We will come back to you with what our responses are to all of the comments that we've had. It's just taking us a lot of time to get through them and give them that consideration. So they're the key themes for housing. Moving on to workspace, and again, this is really encouraging because obviously, as we've said throughout the consultation, it's not going to be we weren't envisaging a grade A office complex in central Winchester. It's going to be something different. We really want to attract the creatives, the independents, keep it flexible and keep it vibrant. And there is strong support across the board throughout all of the workspace comments. People really want to see that. They're really supportive of that. The comments that go with it are that if you're going to have the creatives, the independents, it needs to be flexible. You need to make sure that any terms of occupation and any rental levels are actually tailored and geared up towards the people that you're trying to attract. So it's no good having grade A rents when you're looking for startups and creatives and artist space, for example. So that's something that we're also thinking through, the mix of and balance of uses within that creative section, but huge support for that. And I think it's really refreshing to see. So if we move on to the next slide, that leads us into really the comments around leisure, retail and culture. And again, feeding on from the workspace elements of it, you know, apart from it being flexible and having some sort of creative space in there, it's also about bringing the culture and the leisure through into that. So obviously there's been some discussion around making sure that, again, those creatives and those events can afford to be held in and around the central site. So people would love to see more events like the Hat Fair. They want the space used all year round, so please give some consideration to how that can happen. You know, make some of the spaces covered perhaps. Quite a few comments around that coming through. And also, again, how can we use the space for a whole mix of uses? So will there be the chance to have musical events and, you know, theatre type events and pop-up market type events? So I think people really want creativity and flexibility about the sorts of offer that we have with regards to the leisure and the retail in particular. And around culture, people are really keen to see us build on the reputation that Winchester has as being a cultural hub. Obviously, we've got the cathedral, we've got a wealth of historical and heritage, historical attractions and heritage offers here, but people really want to see us build on that. And I think, as earmarked in the development draft proposals, Wall Staples Hall has been earmarked as the centre and the focus for that. But I think what people would also like us to consider, and I think quite rightly, and you know, we've got the Hampshire Cultural Trust sitting here with us tonight, how can we bring that element of heritage and culture through, not just to an attraction or a destination, but how can we feed that through into the whole of the site? So again, we need to work through those and understand how we can bring that forward. But again, huge support for building on that. And again, there is quite a bit of chatter around moving the retail out and back into the high street. But again, we're looking to make sure that we don't compete, we want to complement. Moving on to the key themes that are coming out of movement, unsurprisingly, there's quite a lot of comment around movement. We've got, obviously, we shared our thoughts on how we can relocate the bus station. The SPD states that the vision is to have a bus hub on Middlebrook Street car park, and that is not something we have ruled out for sure. It's something that is a phased approach. We're not going to be able to deliver it right from the word go. And that's due to several reasons. It's because the Winchester movement strategy, we're not sure where that's going and what changes might happen to the road network, which will then change how the traffic moves around the city. So we don't want to put a bus hub over there at this stage if that's not still going to be relevant when the changes from the movement strategy have worked their way through and we know what we're doing there. So the bus operators also had real concerns about moving across to Middlebrook Street car park at this stage, because key for them, and I think particularly at the moment with the COVID recovery and keeping vibrancy in the high street and in the heart of the city, it's key to bring bus passengers for the time being right into the heart of the centre of Winchester. So moving them to Middlebrook Street car park at the moment was something that was not desirable from the bus operators or Hampshire County Council, until we understand A, the changes from the movement strategy, and B, as central Winchester and the development starts to come forward, the centre of gravity may well change, so that actually Middlebrook Street car park and Friars Gate becomes the heart of the city, and the need to have people right into the Silver Hill, which is where they are at the moment, is not necessarily such a crucial thing. But to go from where we are now in one step right over to Middlebrook Street car park, they see that as really difficult for them to manage. So what we've had to do is understand how we can phase that in the interim, so that we can get on and deliver central Winchester, but that we keep the bus passengers and keep people coming right into the heart of the city. That's not to say that we're not going to ever revisit it again, because of course we will, as the movement strategy starts to come forward and we understand where that goes. We can then keep a track and revisit the buses, but as you'll be aware, the interim solution is an on-street provision. So we've been looking really closely and working really carefully with the bus operators and with the Hampshire as Highways Authority to understand how that might work. We have also looked at what the public realm will look like and how we can not only accommodate buses remaining in the current bus route through Tanner Street and Silver Hill for the interim, but how we can make that much more pedestrian and cycle friendly as well. We do know that that is key, and that is really what people wanted to see in the, and that came out loud and clear in the SPD, cycling and pedestrian friendly. So we're trying in the interim to get a balance between those two whilst things progress, and revisit that going forward. So there's been a lot of debate around that in the consultation, unsurprisingly. Almost equal comments really for and against having a bus hub or not. And there's also a lot of comment around, well, what's it going to look like? You're saying you're moving the bus provision on street. What's that going to look like? We still need facilities. We'll need, and you know, it would be really nice to have a proper cafe and some toilets and, you know, provision to wait in the dry and the safe if we're waiting at night for buses. So a lot of comment around that, and we are still working through all of those at the moment. So that is key for us to really get to the bottom of that, so that we can move forward but also remain flexible to accommodate what might come forward in the future. Also, unsurprisingly, probably there's a bit of conflict around cars in the centre. A lot of people do want to see cars and vehicles reduced and parking reduced, but there is quite a strong element as well saying, well, look, we need easy access to the centre, the businesses need access to the centre, how can we get that balance right? Some say no parking, some say parking. So again, it's evenly split really on those two, so it's a question of understanding and navigating the best way forward with getting that balance right. And I think that also came out when we were looking through some of the comments around the residential and the workspace. You know, some are saying, oh, make sure you have plenty of parking spaces for residents, and others are saying, well, city centre residential accommodation doesn't need parking, does it? So it's, again, it's getting that balance right as we move forward. But those are key topics that have come through. Buses, a lot of talk. Cars and parking, a lot of talk. Huge support for an increase in cycling and pedestrians, but also bearing in mind that people do want to see the fact that people still come into Winchester, and people can still come into Winchester quite easily, and people aren't put off. Movement as well, it's not only in the site, but it's linking through and having those routes through the centre, but linking to the rest of the town and the city. An awful lot to go through on that one, but again, we will feed back the outcomes to you once we've had the chance give due consideration to all of those points that are coming through. But if you commented, again, thank you very much. We do appreciate hearing what you think. The next theme that we're going to look at is public spaces, and again, huge support for the fact that we want to bring Central Winchester to life through its public realm. We all know that exceptional public realm is an aspiration of the SPD. We need to make sure that in the sort of as designs come forward and as the development comes forward, that aspiration is maintained. And obviously, again, a lot of people were talking about, we really want to see top quality design, and we really want to see that link through to the rest of the city. So again, that's a theme that goes through all of the different comments that we're getting. But specifically to public space, people really want to see greening. They really like the idea of green canopies, green gateways. If we're having covered space, can we use trees? Can we make it usable all year round so that it's not just used in the summer, and that it can then bring the evenings to life by ensuring that the public spaces can be used into the evening. Hence all weather provision. They would like to see some covered spaces, which again we are thinking about. And as you can see there, how can we make sure that we link in the concept designs that we've had done for the Broadway already into the wider public realm thinking? So again, it's still very much on our radar that we've had some concept designs done, and whatever the scheme comes forward across the rest of the site, it all needs to work together and tie together. So really interesting thoughts on that. Moving on to the next slide, that sort of leads us a little bit into key themes around sustainability, because huge support for the fact that we have targets and that we aim to get to those targets, but people are saying, are they enough? Should we not be looking to exceed our targets? That's one for debate, and again we will look at how we can factor those responses, how we answer those. We need to balance that obviously with the viability and the deliverability of the scheme, but also, you know, some of the other comments that we've had is that actually people are expecting that now. It's not a nice to have, it's expected, and developers expect it, and occupiers expect it, and residents expect it. So it's understanding how we can bring that forward. A lot of support for obviously the sustainable element of buildings and the imaginative reuse of existing buildings, which is one of the key themes of the vision of the SPD. And as you know, we've been looking at how we do that through some of our existing buildings on the site, such as King's Walk. We're looking at the moment at Coitbury House and hopefully trying to get that back into use. So we're already looking along those lines, and we will continue that as we go forward. And another hugely popular, great support for the fact that we need to work with the fact that we've got or have had in the past flooding issues, and how can we capture that water and work with that water to make features of it and incorporate that in the site. Rain gardens have been particularly popular, so how can we capture that? And people really like the idea of being able to see the waterways, hear the waterways, and really, especially, I think there was quite a lot of talk around it in the residential side. The fact is that if people living by the water, people quite liked that. So really interesting, some of those thoughts that are coming back from that. Active travel was another thing that came out through sustainability, really keen to try where possible to reduce the carbon emissions through reducing the traffic, and again that feeds in and ties into the movement strategy and also the movement comments that we've had here in this consultation. One of the other key themes that we looked at was the delivery approach, and we went out to consultation, and the emerging thoughts there were that we would be looking to find a development partner to deliver Central Winchester with us across the site. Quite a lot of talk around that. Obviously people have referred to the fact that Silver Hill was the premise of Silver Hill was a similar approach, and look where that got us. Are we really thinking of that again? And there was a lot of talk around how can, if you go with one developer, how can you ensure that the elements of the SPD around Winchester-ness can be guaranteed with individual sort of looks and feels and architectural design? How can one developer possibly deliver that? There was a lot of concern around that. And also a lot of talk around timing. Now, it was quite interesting to see that, because a few comments were coming in saying, oh my goodness, this has been going on for years, just get on with it. But also there was a fair few comments coming in that say, be realistic on the timescales. You know, we understand that it's been going on for some time, but get it right, not rush it. And so again, we've got that balance to get right between bringing things forward quite quickly because people are clamoring to see something happen, but also making sure it's the right thing, because we're only going to get to do this once. So we need to make sure it's the right thing. So it's be realistic about the timescales is what came out of that. So quite a bit of chatter around, are you sure? And really, is single developer the right way to go? And also, what about the timescales? You know, we had shared some of the timescales in the consultation, and you know, some of them look quite a long way away, but some of them look like we could deliver some of those elements quite quickly. Some of the other comments that we had coming through, if we could just look at the final slide again. Some people thought there should have been more detail and more information on what we were saying. And of course, we will get to that as the designs and the development comes forward through planning, etc. So at the moment, what we want to do, as I said at the beginning, is to make sure that we take everybody with us every step of the way. So we've looked at the SPD guidance, we've tested some of the scenarios, we've taken what you said you wanted, we've coupled that with some practical things around deliverability, and we are now sharing what that looks like with you before we then press the button and go ahead on, okay, this is what you all like, this is what we think we can deliver, or something along these lines, let's go off and get going on it. So that's where we're currently at. So there isn't more detail at the moment, but there will be. So I think it's a question of just stay with us and keep informed. Design, which I think I've mentioned a couple of times, that's come up on all the different elements, all the different themes. Please make sure that it's top quality design, it's sympathetic to the city, it makes and takes note of where we are and Winchester. And people would really like to see openness and transparency around that. So please, we want to see what those designs are going to look like coming forward. So actually that feeds back to the point I just made. We are doing that, you know, we're sharing with you what we think the proposals might look like, and then we'll start bringing forward more detailed designs as time comes forward, taking you with us. There was quite a bit of comment around archaeology. Obviously there is interest from some quarters and some elements of our local population that are really interested in archaeology, and I know that boreholes in the ground aren't necessarily exciting, and what are we going to do about archaeology, and are we going to have a museum, and what's happening with that side of it? And again, we will answer those questions once we've had the chance to sort of bring them all together and feed back to you where we're going on that. We have said culture and heritage is still very much at the heart of our plans, and we do mean that. So it's a question of relaying that back to you once we've had the chance to work out what that looks like. So that's quite a lot of key themes coming back, but you can see from that there are some elements that run right through. So what we'll do now, I think, is hand back to Kelsey, and I think we've got Jennifer to start looking at questions that have come in. So I will give you all a rest from my voice now.
Hi there. So we've had a lot of questions come in throughout that presentation. Thank you very much to Barry and Louise for that. I think there's a few that came in probably before Varian had got to certain sections of the presentation, so will naturally have been covered during that. but let's try and cover as many as we can now as well. So let's start off firstly with a few easy kind of admin housekeeping related questions. So first one to you, Councillor Lerney, will we be circulating the slides from this presentation?
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. We will add the slides and the presentation to the council website for the meeting. That will also have the link to the recording of the presentation and the audio recording that's currently going out.
Great, thank you very much. I hope that's clear for everyone. The second one, also relating to sort of admin issues. So will we be publishing the questionnaire responses from the consultation, albeit in an anonymised format?
Yeah, Varian, do you want to respond to that one?
Yes, the answer to that is yes, we will. We are following a similar process to the consultation process that we did when we adopted the SPD. So all of the consultation responses will be collated and sort of shared on a spreadsheet and for everyone to see, as will the individual responses. I think those of you that actually filled in a response, it's anonymised, you've got an ID number, and all of those responses will be accessible once we've gone through and formally responded.
Great, thank you, Varian. So now we'll move on to some of my groupings, because there's some very clear themes that have come out of the questions that have been asked. So firstly, I thought we'd go to public spaces. So there's a question that's come in regarding, is there going to be sufficient access for disabled people when the new development arrives?
I think that's certainly something that's going to be a key factor in the overall design. I don't know, if, Sophie, would you like to respond to the access question?
Yes, good evening. The public realm will be accessible to all. So there's obviously no detailed design at the moment, and that will come further downstream. But there is, it is a site with some gradients on it, but there's enough of a opportunity to create level access across it throughout. So the answer is yes, it will be accessible to all. And indeed, one of the big messages, of course, is around creating places for all to enjoy, of all ages and all abilities.
Thank you, Sophie. And I think we've probably got a couple more questions for you now, and potentially. And now we've got you here and Cameron. So the pandemic has shown that there's a need for people to be able to access nature, certainly from a well-being perspective. How will we integrate biodiversity into the built environment?
It's a great question. It's a detailed question. We have had a look at the ways in which a design team could take that forward. It will, in our view, incorporate a number of different strategies, both ground level planting, so landscape such as trees and bushes and plants, but also balconies and rooftops, roof terraces, and so forth. So it may even involve green walls, for example. So there'll be a variety of ways that you could deliver additional biodiversity benefits for the site.
Yeah, I think it's important to say there, though, that we do remain committed to that opening up of the waterways. That is a big theme that's come out through both the consultation and in the SPD, as something that was very strongly desired by local people. And that will be a key objective, not only on this site, but how we can develop the linkages in and along the river, you know, and out towards the nature reserve.
That's right. I mean, there's a kind of wealth of natural open space around the site as well as what's on it as well, and those connections and connectivity is very important.
Yeah, thank you, Sophie.
Thank you very much. Next question relates to the on-street bus strategy and how we can incorporate that into high quality public realm.
Yeah, so I also noticed, Jennifer, there's a few questions about why an on-street bus solution. So
yes,
I'll answer both together if that's helpful.
That would be really helpful, thank you.
So whilst the SPD does make provision for a bus hub, and indeed we haven't taken that off the table, there's nothing to say that couldn't be delivered in the long term. In the here and now, the bus operators were never on board with that proposal and were not willing to move away from their current bus stops behind Marks and Spencer's and on Silver Hill. So we were in a position where, in order to bring development forward, we need to find a solution that's acceptable both to the operators and starts to move the development opportunity forward by not having the existing bus station provision. An on-street provision does that by taking the buses out of the current bus station, but it doesn't preclude there being a bus hub in the future. And we do think that as the development comes forward, then the perception of being close to the high street will change over time. In the interim, the on-street bus provision essentially works with both providing a good quality pedestrian environment, but also a good space for buses to wait. And there are two proposals in that. One is on Friars Gate, where there is more of a layover provision, where buses are waiting for a number of minutes. And then there is a pick-up and drop-off provision on Silver Hill itself. But we're obviously working at this moment in time without the final Winchester movement strategy. And we're also working at the moment without any of the outcomes of that. So we expect there to be some iteration over time of what the solution might be. But it can be a high-quality environment because there'll be a good level of passive surveillance, lots of people walking along the streets, as well as the bus stations, bus stop provision.
Yeah, picking up on that, we've also got a detailed question about the bus strategy that is published on the council website. I think it's important to say about that that is a draft document. It has not been looked at properly yet and has certainly not been endorsed by Cabinet or the council at this point. I wondered if Martin would like to come in and respond to some of the questions about buses from his perspective.
Yes, I mean, obviously, I'm the Cabinet member responsible for the movement strategy, and supporting more low carbon transport, encouraging people to walk, cycle and take public transport is a huge priority. And when the bus companies made a couple of points. One was they are concerned about moving the stops so far away from the current centre. If you read the feedback that they gave to the original consultation, they pointed out that it's quite, shall we say, unusual to have a single point of pickup in a city the size of Winchester near your centre. So I think even, you know, if I think of bus stations in other places, I mean, you know, a good example would be Chichester or something where they have an okay bus station. I used to work in the Kentucky Fried Chicken there many years ago. They still send buses through the centre, and I think we have to think very carefully if we're serious about carbon and serious about air quality, about coming forward with a proposal that scraps the most popular bus stations in the entire city. So we do need to understand how pedestrian movements are going to work, and I understand people's concern. For reasons I'm not entirely sure, the details of how the stops would be used is highlighted as commercially confidential. But I do think we need to look at things like average walking times. You know, if you think about how we manage blue badge parking and other such things, we assume that for some people who use public transport or use blue badges, they have really quite a short walking range, and we need to think about our bus routes in those terms. So from a movement strategy point of view, you know, our point of view is we have to be serious about decarbonising movement, and that means that for people who aren't able to walk and cycle, there is good public transport and it goes to where they want to go. And in terms of the bus station, it has to work with how we're trying to connect up all the forms of transport and how we're trying to encourage bus usage as well. And those details are not yet fully worked through, and they will have an impact on how the bus station works. But I understand people's concerns. Personally, my concern is, if bus companies are expressing concern that, as they see it, moving the bus station the other side of Friarsgate will lead to less people using buses, then that is a concern that, as the person responsible for low carbon, low pollution movement in the city, I have to take seriously. And we have to find a solution that doesn't lead to fewer people using buses, which is what the people who know about bus services are telling us at the moment. If we just charge ahead with a centre the other side of Friarsgate and no further thinking about how to get people onto buses and around the town.
Yeah, and I don't think you can really overstate that popularity issue about the bus stops outside Marks and Spencer's and so on. As a fairly regular bus user myself, I tend to walk or cycle when the weather's nice, but if it's tipping down, then I will hop on a bus and go into town to the city council. So I do get the bus from the Broadway because that's the closest point to the Guildhall. But the number of people who get on there is a fraction of the number who get on outside Marks and Spencer's, even though the bus station and that bus stop are really not very far apart at all. I also regularly hear complaints about the distance between the bus stops, between Marks and Spencer's and the next stop up by the library, or it's the next stop for me. So those distances are really important to people. And they do matter.
If you read the SPD was very clear that in order to manage traffic from the east of the city, we were going to have to retain stops on the Broadway. I would stress that, again, the bus strategy, where it talks about 10 stops, that's a kind of over my dead body category, because having spent days and days and hours working on how we can stop through traffic through the square and enable the market to move to the Broadway. I am not somebody, the intention is not to clear the Broadway so that we put lots of buses on it. But one immediate problem that was highlighted actually in the first round of consultation is, if you have got buses on the Broadway, because the carbon impact of sending the Broadway buses around the one-way system and the pollution impact is quite severe, then walking from there to Middlebrook Street car park, if that's the next place you find a bus, is a very serious distance indeed. So we need to think through all those particular details and how the joining up is going to work. And as I said, from my point of view and the advocacy that I have within the system, sustainable transport, better air quality, enabling people, giving people better choices in the car to go where they want to go in a way that they're able to go in the city is a huge priority.
Right. Thank you, Martin.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we've got a few more questions that have come in, on a similar topic, so let's stay on the same theme. So, will there be a consideration for electric cars on the scheme? So, will we have parking spaces for electric cars and charging points associated with that?
Scott, I could answer that one as well. We've put electric charging points into all our car parks. Almost all our city centre car parks, and we'll expand that as demand increases, is certainly very much the intention. So we're very serious about electric, and we were in the middle of an electric scoping joint with the county council and the bus company. I don't think I'm giving too much away here. We were in the middle of scoping out an electric city bus bid. There are some tricky things to work out to do with long distance buses, because electric buses are slower currently, the current technology, which means that when you're talking about buses to Bishop's Waltham and Alresford and places like that, the technology isn't quite as you would want it. But we were looking at an electric city bus bid. It's something we would absolutely love to do. As COVID hit, it was not something Stagecoach were able to work with us on because they were concentrating on survival. But when the moment comes, it's something we'd want to reopen as an opportunity. and electric vehicles, we will continue to get behind them. There's also a pilot coming for on-street electric vehicle charging, although that's not in the centre, and that's harder to do because of the electricity supplies. There will be the new park and ride car park that is currently planned for Voltex is going to have a lot of electric charging points, as well as solar panels and other such things. So
Great.
There you go.
Thank you very much, Martin. So on a similar theme, there's a number of questions that have come in relating to sustainability and circular economy. So the question is, how is the council looking to provide net zero carbon measures and circular economy principles within the development?
I think that's something that we will certainly be working on as we go forward. I think it's hard to be clear about that at the moment. I don't know if Sophie might want to contribute to that one.
There's no detail at the moment around circular principles, but obviously as a developer or developers are on board to deliver, then that would be one of the elements that the council will be writing into that procurement process for it to be addressed. There's good policy starting to emerge in London, for example, around having a circularity statement attached to planning applications, and one might make that ask here as well.
Thank you very much. So we're now going to move on to the sort of broad category of uses, as I'm calling it. So there's a question that's come in which relates to the rapidly changing retail market, but will there be the flexibility in the development proposals to allow for changes post-COVID into certain new sectors to be incorporated to basically provide a market facing scheme as plans emerge?
Yeah, I think flexibility has always been really important to this scheme. I think the SPD itself recognised that things would change over time and there would be a need for us to change with them. COVID certainly accelerated those changes and emphasised that need for flexibility. Picking up on something that was in another question, a lot of the messages we're getting about the future of the high street is not just around reducing retail, but how you need to make things an experience, and how overall package, not just having retail in the centre, but, you know, for example, exercise studios, you know, your food and beverage offer, those cultural experiences, events and so on are going to be increasingly important going forward. And that's certainly something that we're looking to build in, if you like, to the development in order to make sure that it is not only fit for the future, but will support our high street overall. You know, that volume of people in the centre is really important, and having that core where people want to go and want to be will be essential.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lerny. So the next question very much focuses on King's Walk. So are we able to give an overview of the types of creative spaces that may be provided there, and how we go about attracting occupiers to that particular location?
I think going back to the previous question, we have to be really flexible about what that looks like going forward. You know, it would be foolish to try and say exactly what that might look like at this point in time. The feasibility study we had done by Turner Works proposed a whole series of flexible spaces which could be used for all kinds of purposes, you know, from, you know, meetings, small events, exercise studios, graphic artists, you know, IT people, all kinds of things. Clearly what we want to do is to manage that whole area in a way where it does bring that sense of vibrancy and something different to the town, and to look at that lower cost offer to people who currently find it very difficult to operate in Winchester. The evidence that's coming forward is that there is a very high demand for that kind of space, particularly where it can offer that kind of co-working, that opportunity to share ideas, you know, but also where people can go to find something different. Coming back to that need to support the high street, somewhere where people can go and find something that they can't find, you know, in a run-of-the-mill retailer. I don't know if Verian wanted to add anything in there.
Thank you, Kelsey. Yes, you're absolutely right. I think that the study that we had done with Turner Works, they worked with Worthwhile Works, who were based locally here in Winchester, and the evidence that they provided within that study showed that there is, as Councillor Lurney said, a huge demand for the creative uses, and it's not just about arts and crafts. It's about the whole range of creative industries. It can be, as Councillor Lurney said, from sort of IT and digital and graphic, through to potters and artists and makers, and also an element of gallery space and exhibition space and seminar space. So if you look at that study that, say, Turner Works did with Worthwhile Works here, that, as I say, based here in Winchester, you'll see the depth of uses that King's Walk could potentially accommodate, and I think that's what we're really looking to capture. The space can be really flexible to respond to the various different sort of ups and downs of the economy at the time.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Verian. And a further question on the uses. Will we be considering an Anglo-Saxon museum?
Absolutely, if the prospect comes forward. I wonder if we could ask Paul Sapwell to come in at this point.
I thought I might be asked to come in on that one, and a couple of questions around it. Yes, I mean, our position, bearing in mind that we're an independent body to Winchester City Council, so I'm talking on behalf of us from the cultural sector overall. Clearly, we're happy that culture and heritage is a major thing that's coming back from the feedback here, as we imagined that it would be. Our position is that the visitor economy, and we've felt this for some years, and I don't think there'll be any disagreement, can do better, and that Winchester as a city, as a cathedral city, can punch further at its relevant weight on a national and regional level, and we believe that we punch beneath our weight there. The research that we commissioned several years ago shows that most cities which do succeed in having a more successful, longer stay visitor economy, where people stay for multiple nights, have more major attractions than just a cathedral. And so our view is that a second cultural attraction is a key piece and should be a key piece of thought going forward. Exactly what that looks like is something that we are relatively flexible on at this point, although we believe that the cultural vibrancy that comes with Winchester has a clear USP underpinning it, which is its heritage, and we can't get away from the fact that Winchester has a unique heritage which underpins its cultural offer, and it has several national USPs, particularly the Anglo-Saxon one, of course. So Anglo-Saxons underpinning what we want to do with a museum is absolutely where we believe that we should be. But what I would say is that in terms of thinking about a second attraction, it needs to be two things for me. One is it needs to be fully inclusive. It needs to appeal to a wide audience, including the young people that we're targeting through this development, or that Winchester is targeting through this development. And it needs to appeal to its specialist audience and be academically sound. Achieving both of those things in one attraction is not an easy feat. We don't, on the one hand, want a version of a Disney Anglo-Saxon attraction, but on the other hand, we don't just want something that the academics would like. So we believe a vibrant museum attraction which appeals to multiple audiences is critical. And the other part I just want to say, which touches on some of the other questions here around culture more generally, is that a second attraction needs to be resilient. And working in the cultural sector, as you can imagine at the moment, resilience is pretty much my daily role, actually, given what's happened with COVID. And not different elements of the cultural offer are more resilient than others. And there is a question and a comment here that says, yes, we'd like to do more hat fair type stuff if we had more resources to do it. We would love to see more of that, and we would like to be able to support that wider cultural vibrancy. We think it's a key aspect of any future high street, but we do believe that underpinning that resilience needs to be something that you can, if you like, charge people to go into, and that you can actually see it being sustainable going forward. And at the moment, we believe that a second attraction meets that criteria. We're working with the council to explore options around that. I don't want to be drawn onto exactly where that looks like from our position, but absolutely for us, we believe that the plan accommodates that. Yes, like everyone, we'd like to see more detail, but like everyone, we have to wait for that to work through. But we do believe that our aspirations can be accommodated within the plan. And, you know, the firm yes from Kelsey there is very encouraging to us. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Now, there's a number of questions that have come in that reference the JTP scheme, and there seems to be a little bit of potential confusion around that and what it is we're doing now. I wondered if it would just be helpful to set out what the purpose of the current exercises have been and how that differs to what was done by JTP before.
Yeah, certainly. I think Verian's probably the most appropriate person to come in at this point.
Thank you. Yes, I've seen some of those comments around the JTP scheme, and it's probably quite a good point now to explain what that was and why it was done. I think importantly, like I said at the beginning, and like we've said quite a lot throughout the development of where we are with our development proposals, is that the SPD's planning guidance with a range of uses and parameters that we could test and could be delivered with a number of different options that a scheme could look like. Obviously it's got heights and massing and stuff, but the ranges and the quantums of uses are actually quite flexible, and I think we've said about this throughout the consultation that there's a lot of give in the guidance around the quantum of uses particularly. So while JTP were on board and while JTP worked up the guidance for the SPD, we obviously needed to keep testing that the scheme, there is a scheme, or there would be a scheme within those parameters that would be deliverable. So JTP did do some thinking around, well, if we put these parameters in the SPD, there is a scheme that could be delivered, and we're therefore confident that these ranges of uses could be delivered. They were never a master plan for the site, they were scheme options, which we worked through with them just to understand that the parameters in the SPD were deliverable. What we then did, once JTP's commission had been completed and the SPD was adopted, we built on the work that JTP did, understanding that there were these great sort of ranges that we could work with, and actually bearing in mind that JLL also brought an added sort of dimension to that, in the fact that there is a JTP scheme that could be delivered within the range of uses. There are other options, and if we want to gear the site to fill one of the gaps and help build a more resilient economy for Winchester, there are other options that maybe we should be looking at. So that's what we've been doing with the 3 scenarios. We haven't started again. We've not gone back to the drawing board. We've really picked up where JTP left off. We've looked again at what we want to try and achieve from the site, wider than the SPD, but how can we incorporate some of those other elements that we've since uncovered? How can we get the young people to stay in Winchester? How can we add a different dimension to the offer that Winchester has within the parameters that the SPD gives us? So that's what we've done with the 3 scenarios. We showed you at those sessions what they could look like if we maxed out to the most for the cultural elements, or we maxed out to the highest proportion of residential that we could. And we asked you what you thought at that open forum back in February, saying these are the options, this is what they could look like if we developed something within the parameters of the SPD and building on the work that JTP did. So what is it that you really like from these options that we can take forward into a proposal that we can actually work on developing? So that's the difference between what we did with JTP and what we have been doing since then. We've built on it and we've not started again.
Thank you very much, Varian. That's very helpful. So next question, please can you clarify what marketing of the site has been undertaken to date? Oh, you're on mute.
I think it's important to say that at the moment we're simply doing soft market testing. Would Katie like to come in here?
Yes, of course. Good evening, everyone. Building on what Varian also said, I think one of the important things that we've done is be very clear about viability of the scheme. And to be able to come forward with anything, it has to be viable. And those mix of uses, particularly ones which might not necessarily ones that drive the highest value, because that's the choice we made by pursuing the type of development we want Central Winchester to be in fulfilling that gap of the young people. It's been really important to get that balance right. So we have been, as part of the exercise, having conversations with different types of development partners, and in terms of their appetite for a scheme such as this, their ability to deliver across the whole mix of uses, and some who has a more of an ability potentially maybe just to deliver the residential element rather than that. So we've had a complete range to be able to be sure that the scheme that we bring forward, there will be a market appetite for. I think that that's really, really important, because without a market appetite and a viable scheme, then we won't have anything to be able to do here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Katie. I'm conscious of time scales, and I wondered if there's another slide to share or not, because a lot of the next questions relate to next steps and when we might start to see things happening. Is there a further slide to share on that, or? Fine. Okay. Yeah. So I wonder if we go on to this section now.
Yes, please do that, Jennifer. Yeah, do you want to run through the questions, or shall I?
Fine.
Yeah, I mean, if I speak, I think I'll probably cover the answers to most of the questions.
That's what I thought. Yes.
I think it's important to say that because of the volume of feedback, we are still collating all the information that we've reported back to you today. And while the response to the consultation was very positive, particularly about the overall shape of the proposals, obviously concerns do remain. With regard to the archaeology, we do expect some initial results back in mid-February, and in due course we'll be both reporting on those results and bringing expert knowledge to bear to ensure that we keep following the best practice in our work to both understand and preserve the history of the site. And I think it's really important to keep emphasising that best practice aspect of things. Obviously, a lot of people are very keen on the concept of the big dig, but the archaeological advice is very much to work out what's there and what state it's likely to be in before you actually effectively destroy what might be there on the site. So we will approach the archaeology very carefully and following, as I say, that best advice. The SPD proposals remain the principles on which we base development on, but it is a set of policies, not a plan which can actually be built out. And I think it's important, we've said that several times today, but that is an important aspect to the SPD. We are moving that forward. Further work has allowed us to produce a framework which creates a viable proposal which can bring about the outcomes in the SPD, which are the important bit, that vibrant mixed use pedestrian friendly quarter developed incrementally within an overall plan that the SPD seeks to achieve. We understand the impatience around the project and we recognise the desire of many for us just to get on. But we have been listening to the concerns that have been raised and following the consultation outcome, we are taking the time to look again at the delivery model for the site. So we'll reconsider that. We're looking very closely at the financial implications. So we're planning to take a paper to Cabinet in March 2021 to take the project forward. The timeline for development will be determined by the decisions within that report, but we are looking at short-term interventions for the area as well as those long-term development plans which will help support the high street. So essentially we do hope that we can make a difference relatively soon rather than waiting for the whole development to be ready. The current economic and financial context is of course very difficult. It's rapidly changing and right now we don't know exactly where we're going to be in 6 months' time, let alone over the years that these kind of projects take. So we will have to move forward in a steady way, but we are looking to move to a stage where people can really see that change is happening. There will be another open forum and I don't know, Verian, do you want to come in and add to that?
Thank you, Kelsey. Yes, I think we are planning another open forum so that we can feed back to you what our responses are to all the comments that we've had in. And we want then to share the outcomes and how we want to move the project forward. So we haven't set the date for the open forum yet, but it will be before we have the Cabinet session in March. So probably towards the end of February, watch out, we'll have another open forum and we can then feed back to you where we've got to with our responses and what then we want to do to take the project forward.
Right, now, Jennifer, were there any questions that we haven't covered in there? I'm quite conscious that the presentation did take rather longer than I expected when we originally ran through the slides.
There are a few more actually, Councillor Lerny. So one,
yeah, so I think we'll take an extra 10 minutes to make up for the length of the presentation.
Understood. So can we come to cycling? So there's a comment here about it's quite difficult to cycle safely across central Winchester at the moment. Have any considerations for cyclists been given in our current thoughts?
Yeah, cycling is one of those areas which obviously where the devil is always in the detail, and until we get to that more detailed design, it's going to be hard for us to say that yes, this is going to be, you know, amazing for cyclists. But certainly I'm a very keen cyclist myself. I'm very keen to see a development that's really permeable for cyclists, that doesn't exclude them from areas and that adds to that connectivity within the city. Clearly the movement strategy will have quite a lot to say about that, and I don't know if Martin wants to add something around the aspirations for cycling.
Yes, I mean, if Matthew wants to drop me a note, I'm very happy to send through some information about the City of Winchester movement strategy. North-south route is recognised as a real issue, and there are a lot of conversations going on at the moment about what we can do to improve it. The idea for contraflows on Parchment Street and St Peter's Street have been identified, for example. But there's a lot of thinking going on as to how we can sort out the north-south route for people, and obviously the expectation and the intent would be that that was also reflected in the thinking and planning for central Winchester. All I'd say is we're not going to be able to sort out north-south or actually decent routes east-west just with central Winchester. We have to look at other things as well, and that is very much within the scope of the project work that's happening at the moment. But if you're interested, drop me an email and I will send through what the current thinking is. You can also find, if you look at I think there was a recent environment scrutiny committee at Winchester City Council where there was a presentation on the movement strategy, which I think included the thinking of the key routes that were being worked on. So I hope that's useful to you.
Thank you, Martin. And while we've got you on, there's a question around when do we expect the results of the movement strategy?
Well, I was due to be having a meeting to see a final round of reports fairly soon, but it's a joint project between the city and the county, and unfortunately some county officers can't make it, so it's been delayed again. I've literally just had a meeting invite come in for the next board meeting, which was going to be on the 5th of February and is now going to be on the 4th of March. But I'm going to try and drive things ahead faster than that.
Thank you, Martin. I wonder if we could come back to Katie Kopek. There's been a sort of follow-up question relating to the soft market testing. Have we found that there's been any information that's come out of that that we can share here?
Yes, of course. I think when we went to engage with the different developers and the different types of developers, we presented with them an extract of the consultation material, and we walked them through a presentation to give them more than just the written word, so that we were giving them more information upon which to make their decision. I think that was part of the inquiry. I think it's fair to say that in terms of the types of delivery mechanisms, we've looked at a number of different delivery options, part of which was testing that. One of the things that everyone is really keen that this place should be is a great place, and we know that the council wants to control that and make it a great place, but interestingly that is exactly what the developers themselves were saying. And to be able to make a great place, they want to control the spaces in between the buildings as much as the buildings themselves. And actually, as a result of that, there was much more of a preference of there being fewer developers on site than multiple developers on site, which not only protected the comprehensive, cohesive nature of what the SPD wants to achieve, but also prevents the practical complications of lots of people wanting to do their developments at different times, different calls on the infrastructure. It's really important that we do recognise that that level it's important to be able to deliver what is quite a small site as fast as possible is probably more likely to be with as few developers as possible. That's not to say they couldn't involve different architects to give different fields for different places, but I think that is very different to a number of different developers that potentially will feel compromised in their ability to control and create those and curate the spaces between the buildings if they're carved up into smaller pieces. So that was one of the bits of feedback that we certainly had, and one that we are looking at very closely in how we deliver. We're very keen to make sure that we do that, we get that delivery right, and we have heard that the single developer may not be as appealing. So we're looking at how best we can meet that, particularly, and I have mentioned the viability word once already, to ensure that there is a viable scheme that will be delivered for Winchester.
Thank you very much, Katie. Are we able to touch on the potential phasing for the development and when we may see things coming forward and happening?
I mean, the phasing was included in the information that we put out originally. A suggested phasing plan was in there, so essentially looking at starting at the Friarsgate end of the site and moving through. Verian, do you want to say something about phasing?
Thank you, Councillor Lerney. Yes, I will. I think, as Councillor Lerney said, we did share some of our thinking on phasing throughout the consultation, and I think a lot will depend on the delivery of the site when we sort of start to go through the consultation and think about the point that Katie was just making. How do we get the best delivery for the site, bearing in mind we want to deliver something in line with the SPD? So we did think that there are some things that we can do short term. You know, we do want to do some work around, for example, King's Walk. We do want to look at what we can do with Friarsgate. We are looking at doing something with Coitbury in the short term, whilst we then plan out the phasing for the longer term vision. But again, as Kelsey said, it's a question of understanding how we can resolve the issue about vacant possession of the bus station, because we can't develop on that site until the bus station question has been resolved and implemented. So it's a question of understanding how all the bits of the jigsaw puzzle fit together, and we will have a much clearer idea when we've given some more thought to the delivery across the piece, how we're going to get that comprehensive regeneration scheme across the site. We can then start looking more at phasing, but we will come back to you at the next open forum and at Cabinet in March with a clearer idea on what those steps look like.
Thank you very much, Verian. Someone's mentioned the Winchester vision, so I wondered if it would be helpful to just outline how we're taking reference and incorporating the information that's coming out of that group into our plans here.
Yes, I think that's quite an interesting one. Actually, on my desk, on top of my copy of the Central Winchester SPD, I have my copy here of the One Great Win work that was done for the Winchester vision, which is coming forward to the town forum. I've actually been really impressed by the work that's gone into the vision for Winchester, and I think the concepts within it are actually really useful. I mean, it's very supportive of the kind of things we're talking about doing in central Winchester. And it's important to recognise that, as we've often said, central Winchester is just one part of the council's aspirations for Winchester. It will fulfil some of the functions that we want to see improved within the town. It won't do everything. And I think that idea of trying to achieve a lot of small things in a lot of different places around the town is really important. We're certainly really keen to integrate that within our plans and look at taking that forward. So certainly there's no contradiction that we see within what's coming out of that vision, what we're looking to take forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lerney. There's a question that's just come in, which is in relation to speed. So why do we want to develop this site as fast as possible?
I think, yes, I think that was Katie that said developing the site as fast as possible. Clearly people don't want to have a building site in what's the heart of our city for a long period of time. So people do want to see things progress reasonably at a reasonable pace. So we're not seeking to develop this as fast as possible, although sometimes these kind of developments do seem to be proceeding at a rather glacial space. But what we don't want to do is to leave what's a very sad and derelict part of the town in places for any longer than we have to. And I think we need to make that steady progress, which will see us achieving development in a reasonable period of time, without too much conflict with other users of the city centre.
Okay, thank you. And did you want to take another couple of questions, Councillor Lerny, or?
Yeah, we'll take another couple.
Fine. So will you commit to ensuring any new developments are built to BREEAM excellent or outstanding?
I think that's certainly the direction we're travelling on. I think it's important to say that in some ways those are slightly outdated standards, and Katie might like to comment further on that.
Yes, absolutely. I think we will be delivering whatever the latest standard is and hopefully trying to exceed them. It's going to be important, but it has to be balanced again, once again, with the ability to deliver those and impact potentially on viability. But we want to use central Winchester as a sustainable example for others, because it's really important both to people in Winchester, and it's also something that occupiers themselves are seeking to be part of, both residential and in commercial. They want to be part of something which is looking to save the planet, particularly on a scheme which we are pointing towards the youth. They are voting with their feet. They are choosing their people that they work for, depending on their social responsibility statements within their report and accounts. This is a change that we have to deal with. It's not something we can think about doing. It's something we must address. And I also think that regulatory, be it BREEAM or otherwise, regulatory, there will be much more pressure to excel and do more than the current standards that are currently in place.
Yeah, and I think adding to that, that's also the case where we're reusing existing buildings. Yep. It's not just around where we're building new, and we do want to, where possible, reuse existing buildings, you know, as was suggested in the SPD, that imaginative reuse of existing buildings. But that does have to be done right.
Thank you very much. And have we considered the use of electric hopper buses?
I think that's definitely a Martin question.
That's not been the main focus of movement strategies, which is much more about ensuring that buses have priority and able to go where they need to go. So I don't know the answer to that. I can ask Stagecoach if they've looked at it and how it might work, and I'm quite keen. It's certainly our intention, as we look at the buses under the City Council's control with the park and ride, to see what opportunities there are, think more innovatively. We also, when we redid our car parking strategy, it used to be called, it turned into a parking and access strategy, and deliberately agreed that we earmarked funding in order to support innovative projects which will help cut air pollution and encourage people to walk, cycle and take public transport more where that works as a preferred option. And I'm happy to include that idea as within scope of that work. I think it is important to emphasize how good in air quality terms, although obviously the challenge of carbon, although the carbon per person is also good, modern buses are. I mean, a modern Euro 6 bus, or another subject I know about, a modern Euro 6 bin lorry produces fewer particulates and air pollution than my 10-year-old Golf Polo, VW Polo. And obviously, if you fill your buses, then your carbon position per passenger improves dramatically. So they are an important part of the mix for the future. But we should also definitely be looking at electric vehicles as well, recognizing that that doesn't fully solve the particulate problem.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. So we've got a question here, which relates to bins. How?
Yeah, I don't think we need to deal with that one. I think
let me find the bins one. Where's that? I'll answer that in the text. Where is it?
It's right at the top, Martin.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll go up to the top.
Yeah.
I feel we've covered the key themes, unless there's anything else that you feel we've missed, Councillor Lurney.
No, I quite like the question, which we haven't actually responded to, mentioning that York Minster took 252 years to build. Certainly our aspirations are to be much faster than that. I think we've. Is there anything you wanted to pick up on, Martin?
No. Yes, the bin question was asked by a former officer who was involved in the project for garden waste bins, and he wanted to know what proportion were larger ones. The answer is 75% for those that are interested. But anyway, no, I think the movement side of this is genuinely really difficult. You know, we're a small Anglo-Saxon town, a lot of people wanting to drive into it. A small Anglo-Saxon street/Roman street design centre, but also if we look at our city, it's also clear that we can be ambitious. You know, people always say, oh, you can't close road X, to which I say, we closed the high street after 1,000 years, or rather our predecessors did. So if somebody tells me it can't be done, then I would go, well, you know, if we can close the high street to through traffic after 1,000 years, we can change anything. It just may take a bit of effort to do it.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Yeah, I think one final point I'll pick up with from a question is around the issue around the needs of actual local residents to the site. We did have a special session for the direct neighbours of the site to talk to them about what they thought of the scheme. And clearly we are very conscious, Martin's very conscious of the needs of local residents and their desires, for example, to at least keep some parking available in the centre of town for residents, and we're looking at how we can best do that for everybody.
Yeah, we're going to have a review of on-street parking charges in the coming year and how we organise that. COVID has changed so many things, and one of the things it's changed is a lot more people are working at home, and so our city centre parking is under a lot more pressure, and we need to find ways of solving that. And that's certainly something that we're thinking about.
Right, thank you. I think that brings us to the end of the questions that we can sensibly answer at this point. I will say that we will be responding to questions that were asked during the consultation in our cabinet paper in March. So the questions that were raised then we will be picking up and having responses to. Obviously quite a lot of them were actually asking about detail that we haven't developed yet. So we won't have the answers for some time, but we will look to be clear where that's the case and when that might come forward. But I think that usefully brings us to the end of this session, and I hope people have found it informative and useful. As I said, we will be coming back before too long with another open forum to look at how we're taking the scheme forward. as a result of this conversation and this consultation and the conversations we're having. And I look forward to bringing that to you in due course. I'd particularly like to thank my panelists, even though I didn't invite all of them to speak. They will have obviously their own opportunities to talk to us about their opinions. As I've said, they have their own opinions on things, and they're keen to bring their views to bear on the council as well. So thank you very much, everybody. Good night, and I'll see you soon.